Most newer players barely use the internal market, and when they do, it's usually because something has already gone wrong. But used properly, the internal market isn't a panic button. It is one of the strongest tools available to you in the early game. Learn how to use it well, and you'll expand faster, stabilize sooner, and build a far more resilient economy than the game would otherwise allow. Greetings, I am the composer of Strands. When you first load into a game of Stellaris, your economy is almost always out of tune. Your priorities are clear. You want to expand to new colonies, build mining stations, and move your civilians into more productive jobs. But early on, the limiting factor usually isn't what you want to do. It's what your economy can actually support. Minerals are tight, alloys are scarce, and your pops simply aren't numerous enough yet to solve that problem on their own. That's exactly the phase of the game the internal market is designed for. Not as a last resort, but as an accelerator. If you buy or sell resources on the internal market, prices respond. Whenever you buy from the market, that resource becomes more expensive. Whenever you sell, it becomes worth less. This is why a lot of players conclude that the market isn't worth it. But that conclusion usually comes from using it the wrong way. The key distinction is this: monthly trades, not bulk trades. When you set up a small recurring monthly trade and keep it within the limits shown on screen, the price impact resets back to the baseline every single month. That allows you to convert resources continuously without permanently distorting market prices. For example, minerals can be bought up to +42 per month, or sold up to -64, with no long-term impact. Stay within those bounds, and the market stops being volatile. It becomes predictable, and once it is predictable, you can start using it intentionally. The most immediate benefit of the internal market is simple. It lets you move faster. In the early game, minerals are almost always the first real bottleneck. You need them for districts, buildings, and stations, but your starting economy simply doesn't produce enough of them yet. A small monthly mineral purchase changes that immediately. At game start, you can safely buy +42 minerals per month. I set this up before I even unpause the game. The exact resource can change for certain empires, but the principle does not. That single trade lets me start constructing buildings on my homeworld earlier, which means your civilian pops enter productive jobs sooner. And because those jobs come online earlier, their output starts compounding years ahead of schedule. You're not creating resources out of thin air. You're shifting production earlier in the timeline of the game. There's another reason the internal market is so powerful early on. Not all jobs in Stellaris are equally efficient. Some jobs generate more value per pop, others generate less, particularly in the early game. Technicians and farmers produce 6 base resources per 100 pops. Miners produce 4. And whilst jobs like artisans and metallurgists might look productive on paper, they also consume minerals to function, reducing their net efficiency. The internal market lets you lean into this difference. By generating surplus energy, one of the easiest resources to scale early, you can acquire minerals, alloys, or consumer goods through the market without needing your entire supply to come from jobs alone. That reduces pressure on less efficient production and lets your pops focus on roles that generate more value overall. You're not bypassing the economy, you're smoothing out its early game inefficiencies. Once you've established better jobs for your civilians, a different constraint starts to dominate. You become pop limited. Your economy isn't constrained by a lack of buildings and districts, but by how quickly you can grow new pops. Early on, that growth is slow. You have limited technology, few planets, and you haven't reached maximum logistic growth yet. At this point, the internal market lets you extract value from sources that don't require pops at all. Trade hubs generate trade value. Hydroponics bays produce food. Both can be converted immediately through the market. 5 upgraded starports with trade hubs and hydroponics bays generate 80 trade value and 50 food per month. without using a single pop. Those are resources you can sell, freeing your actual population to work on research, unity, and growth instead. In the early game, pops are your most valuable resource. The internal market lets you spend income that didn't cost you any. As your economy matures, these trades shouldn't remain static. As more jobs open up and planets fill out, it often becomes better to retain resources you are otherwise selling. You might sell food early on, then later deprioritize farmers and reduce those trades instead. You might open your grand archive, find your energy upkeep increasing, and see the equation shift towards buying rather than selling. Or a surplus of a strategic resource might allow you to sell it in order to fund maximum alloy and consumer good purchases. The important point is this: the internal market is not something you set once and forget. It's a tool you revisit as your economy changes. Eventually, the internal market reaches its natural endpoint. One of the earliest proposals in the galactic community is often the formation of the galactic market. Once established, prices are no longer driven by your trades alone. They respond dynamically to what every empire is buying and selling. That makes the simple early game heuristic less reliable, but it also opens the door to balancing your economy on a much larger scale. The internal market isn't made obsolete here, you simply graduate from it. In the early game, the internal market isn't a crutch. Used properly, it's a lever. Monthly trades let you turn surplus into momentum, smooth out inefficiencies, and push past the limits imposed by slow pop growth. Use it early, revise it often, and allow it to give way naturally to production as your empire matures. And that is how you turn the internal market into a genuine early game advantage.